G'day folks, welcome to this continuation of the fight for Kesternich from Wacht Rhein. We're up to the third turn now. What you can see here is basically the Germans have begun to, well, not really pull back, but they've tried to keep some forward defences whilst bringing back a strong force into this Hammer objective X here. So the Americans have captured Kesternich. The Germans don't really have capabilities for a counterattack, despite this being, well, I was going to say relatively lightly held, but it's actually got a defense of 10 with armour. Hard for the Germans to counterattack into there. So they've decided to try to hold part of this front, slow down the Americans, whilst also really focusing some strong defences in this hex down here. Now we do have a one-step infantry battalion, engineering company, and that Z-step AT. So when we come to this Z-step unit, they're not even one step. They're very easily lost. But that's AT, so it'll be valuable if the Americans bring their armour down. So now we're up to the American turn, and as usual, the first thing we do is the mode determination phase. Now, the Americans have 2 turns left to hold that hex and capture this one. And we need to kind of pause here and think about how they're going to get that done. They could... what can they do? They've got a decent force up here. This is a 2-step battalion with these M10s, M10 battalion. But if I put them into prepared assault mode now, they can only move. Well, the M10s could move 2 hexes, but that infantry could only move 1. I could maybe break them up a little bit, get the M10s to move 2 hexes, maybe put them down here. Focus on clearing out this hex for now. So these are guys in entrenchment level 2, and we've got 2-step German battalions in that hex, pretty well held. Over here there's a 3-step battalion and just a company there, and a bit weaker out on the right there with that 2-step battalion. So it kind of creates... experienced players are probably looking at this and saying, well, of course you should do this, but as I'm still learning the system, I'm not sure how I can use these next 2 turns to capture this hex. What do I do? Do I try and push through on the left here and just try and swing around hard? Kind of shifting my forces out, American forces out to the west there, and focus on that western side, the German line, push them out of that those entrenchments, and focus artillery kind of here and just hit it hard. Or is there some other approach? I think, just as I kind of say that, I think that's the best way to go about it, because I don't want to waste too much time out here on the right. Tough defense of 8 there, defense of 5 in the forest there. This is also restricted terrain and restricted terrain. I'll also be attacking here into restricted terrain as well. So if I can really try and clear out that German left flank, and maybe I'll attack on the right as well. Attack on the right, attack on the left with as much as I can. Might be the way to go about it. So I'm going to put this M10 battalion in prepared assault mode. I'm going to leave these guys in tac mode. I'm going to place this stack in prepared assault mode, and this stack in prepared assault mode, and this stack in prepared assault mode, and this stack in prepared assault mode. We're going to try and attack that, focus as much as possible on this left flank. So I'm going to try and shift everything around to here. I'm going to try and push these guys through that gap. I'm going to bring up, these guys can move 2 hexes, 1, 2, because they're a mech unit. And these guys in tac mode can kind of go, let's see if I get the movement rates for this terrain right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll have to hold there. Okay, just trying to get basically as many of these forces as possible closer to that hammer hex. Now I could really bring these guys, I could bring them down. Or I could just leave them there. I think I might leave them there and focus on that right hand side. I don't know actually, no. I kind of need to be able to bring as much as possible into attack hammer on the last turn of this scenario. Now again, in a broader campaign or a larger scenario, you'd have more time to think about this, but this is all about rushing my offensive and what I can do within this short space of time to defend these, to push hard against the German line. So I'm going to try and push these guys down and push these guys into Kesternich to defend that objective. So we'll bring everything we can into here. These guys, you know what? Ignore that idea of a prepared assault. They won't attack. Because they'll only have a strength of basically 5. It'll be 1-to-1 with the forest, which will be pretty bad. So that's our movement done. No construction. We go straight into combat. We have German defensive fire first, and they are going to want to hit this stack here with the full strength of their 8 barrage points. They are going to roll the die and get a 2. That's not going to be very good. That'll be 10. Now they're in prepared assault. So spotter, of course. Let's see. Let's identify our spotter. These guys are in clear terrain, so they can be seen. Spotted by the Germans here, let's say. They're in prepared assault, so they ignore those defensive bonuses, but they have mixed. So they'll ignore, they won't get the dice roll modifiers for terrain, but they will get that -2 for having mixed armor type. Okay, so that brings it down to, what did I say, 8, 9, 10, brings it down to an 8, which is just 1 artillery shift. Like so. Which is not too bad for the Americans. Could be much worse. Artillery, I'm realising, I mean, if they would have rolled a 9 there, let's say, that'd bring that to a 2 numerical hit result. So that artillery die roll, they can be very critical in these sort of more focused situations. Okay, so now we get to American US artillery fire, and I think they want to launch 2 volleys against this hex here and really try and do as much damage as possible. So we're going to have one mission, 2 volleys. It's 2 die rolls. Our first roll is 2. That's probably not going to be bad because they have lightly wooded. So the wooded terrain is going to be a -1. The E22 is going to be a -2, so it's net -3. Net -3 from a result of 10 is 7. That's going to cause an armor shift for the Germans unless I've mixed any. We need to identify a spotter as well. Surely there's a vantage point nearby they can spot from. No, it doesn't look like there is. No vantage point there. But they can be seen because we have adjacent attackers in prepared assault. Unit density I should have thought about as well. That's also a factor. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's not a step I don't think, so no modifiers there. So net -4 from 12 is 8, which is 1 artillery shift. Second volley on the same hex is a 6. That brings us up to 14. Again, -4 is 12, which is another artillery shift, and 1 hit. One numerical hit. Okay, so resolving a numerical hit from fire support. We can either take the first step as a hit, first hit as a step loss, or as a retreat. And I'm kind of thinking it might actually be good to retreat here. Although they're at their limit to artillery shifts. So they ignore subsequent artillery shift results. So if they retreat here, they'll remove suffer 1 ace hit, they actually ignore, retreat 1 hex. They would be retreating through a maneuver covering terrain hex. So I'm thinking if they retreat down here, maneuver covering terrain. Oh no, wait, a retreating stack that enters. Oh yeah, non-MCT. Yeah, so basically maneuver covering terrain means they can retreat into that type of terrain without suffering a step loss. Yeah, I think they might retreat. Because that then puts him in a pretty good position to, so it's that vantage point there. It is better terrain as well for defending in. So yes, they retreat into that terrain. They don't suffer a step loss. If I understand that all correctly, they would normally suffer another artillery shift, but they're at their maximum. And that's it. Now the Americans can advance. And still participate in a ground assault. And they basically have to follow the path of the retreat. And we want to get as strong as possible here. So the best units we can, probably not those M10s to be honest. What have we got up here? A full strength battalion, they'll advance in. They're fatigued, so I probably don't want to bring these guys. And they can also bring come to this hex here. Oh geez, it's going to be tough. We'll bring in over there. Okay, so we're going to have a mix of units. We'll bring in those guys, and we'll bring in, I guess, the M10s as well. I think we can probably bring in some more units. I'll just have to get another fatigue marker and be mindful of stacking limitations. In fact, that is... No, it's not. It's not a constricted terrain hex. So I'm mindful of stacking. I have to remind myself of stacking limits. Two battalions, one company. Yeah, pretty much at my limit there. I could have brought in a fatigued battalion. But that'll do. Okay, not great. Now we get to ground assault, and I will try to bring both of these to attack this hex to get as much space as possible to launch that final attack there. This is not constricted terrain. Okay. I should point out attacker status adjustment segment. I can remove that because I don't have an enemy adjacent to them. No combat strength modifiers for those units. Defender modifiers. No modifiers for the defender. Ooh. Attacker column shifts. So they're in. Let's look at the odds here first. We have got 6, 10, 12, 17, 21, 21 versus 5, 10, 11. 21 versus 11. So that's going to be 1.5. So 3 to 2 odds. Just one short. Yeah, that's a shame. I don't think because they're fatigued, they'll just be halved. Oh well, 3 to 2. Column shifts, PA mode, so it brings it to 2 to 1. For each AS marker, so it brings us there's 2 artillery shifts on the defender. So we go 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1, 4 to 1. Defender column shifts, 1 for that attacker artillery shift, so it brings it back down to 3 to 1. And we have now an adjacent eligible defending unit. It brings it back down to 2 to 1. So having an adjacent defender to an attacker helps bring it down to 2 to 1. 2 to 1 column, line 3. It doesn't look great at the start. Okay, now let's determine dice roll modifiers. Proficiency rating is 6 and in fact, they're no longer in entrenchments. Didn't they run away from those entrenchments? So 6 on 6 means no modifier there. No combat reserve. Regimental integrity. The Germans get regimental integrity. The Americans get regimental integrity. So both sides get that bonus, which cancels out. In terms of armour, the Germans have their 80 Z-step unit. The Americans have their 4 armour factor, so they cancel each other out. So there are basically no bonuses either side. So geez, this is looking at a 2 to 1, line 3 with no modifier die roll. I'll do the defender first because it's easier to resolve that way. The defender rolls a 15, which is a result of 2 mandatory, 1 discretionary. So 2 mandatory step losses. Ouch. Okay, we'll take 1 from that armour and 1 from that infantry battalion. And 1 discretionary. I think I'll pull them back 1 hex. Retreat. Actually, no, they can choose to stand their ground if they pass a PR, which they do. So they'll stand their ground. The defenders, Germans. So the Americans on the attack now, rolling 71 with no modifier, gives a result of 1 discretionary. They will use this to try to stand their ground, and they succeed. So no effect. So the Germans, the Americans, that's the end of the American combat phase. They pretty much did the same thing in the last scenario. They started off really well and then gradually kind of slowed down and began to falter. That's the end of the American combat phase. The American administrative phase. I'm going to quickly check to see if I can make fatigue recovery. Section 14.3. Okay, recover from fatigue. They didn't move, did not participate in a ground assault. Yeah, so I think these guys can now recover from fatigue. They didn't move, they didn't participate in a ground assault, and they didn't suffer from a fire support, enemy fire support mission. So they are, that's good news for them. It gives me 2 battalions that can move up. The problem is, this is the hex I need to capture with 1 turn left. And all the Germans need to do is hold their ground. So in their, in fact, defensive 3-6, they're still not in a good position to counterattack. The Germans will just pull back a little bit, hold their ground, no German combat. They're pretty happy holding exactly where they are, I think. We're just going to put, sorry, they should be removed. Which is going to put the Americans in a really desperate situation. Heading into the final turn, they basically have to launch a very weak attack on that final hex to capture it. Okay. Let's try that. Heading to the final turn now. US turn, mode determination phase. Alright, so we don't have many units that can join in this attack. Basically those 2, they can't make it. We don't need that armor. It is, it's going to be even tougher because it's going to be a constricted hex and I can only attack with 2 units from here. So I'm going to get my 2 strongest units in that hex, which I basically have already. So it all comes down to basically this attack. The Germans will launch their defensive fire first on that hex. They roll a 2. It is rough terrain. They ignore that because they're under prepared assault. So we're looking at 10 minus 2 for the mixed is 8, which is a single artillery shift. I think it was the same as last time. Now the Americans will fire 2 volleys here. Strength of 8 plus 9 is 17. Minus 2 is 17, 15. Strength of 15 is 2 numerical hits. Oh, okay. Well, this is where artillery seems to be very effective here. So I rolled a 9 for that artillery. Plus 8 is 17. Minus 2 for the... Actually, it's minus 1 for the rough. Is 16. No field works there. Okay, so 16, which is an artillery shift marker, and 2 numerical hits. Now they have to hold their ground, but they don't have many steps left. They could pull back and try to counterattack, survive, and then sort of counterattack in the German turn. Otherwise, if they try to hold their ground here, there's 2 options here. They can hold their ground and take a step loss, or they can retreat and survive. If they hold their ground, there's only like there's 1 step of that battalion left, and then there's the engineers, and then I think the Z-step company, the Z-step unit will be removed as a result of those step losses. So I think I have to pull back, take the first step as a retreat. So all units suffer an artillery shift. They retreat 1 hex. I subtract 1 numerical hit. And I divide the remaining by 2 rounded up. I must apply 1 more numerical hit. And I think I have to then take a loss. I'll take the engineers. Okay. What that means is that the Americans can now advance. Maybe I should have attacked. Yeah, should have. Jeez. I'm making such a mess of these cannons. Yeah, I should really be looking to, because I don't just need to capture, I need to hold it as well, don't I? So let's also get an attack going with those guys. Okay, that's the German bombardment. American bombardment now, I think they'll target this hex here with jeez, these things get bumped around so easily. Bombarding here with 1. Oh my goodness, these counters are so light and flimsy. Bombarding here with 1 mission, and we'll send another mission I think over here as well. So we're looking at this target here being spotted from anywhere really. They're under prepared assault. Alright, die roll of 1. 8 plus 1 is not going to do anything. It's going to be no effect, I'm pretty sure. They're in... Actually, hold on. That's 9. Minus 1 is 8. It'll be an artillery shift on there. Oh, I kind of feel like I want to roll again to really hit this hex, but we'll send it out here. Alright, another mission, another result, another artillery shift there. Now the American combat phase, and I think we'll try to bring as much as possible. 1, 2, 3, actually no, we'll do 5, 6, 10, 15 versus, oh geez, this is a strong hex, 11. So looking at 1 to 1, I think I'll bring these guys in as well. 15, 19, 24 on 11 is 2 to 1. 2 to 1, line 3. 2 to 1, line 3 because it's in the forest. We look at combat strength modifiers. Probably should have put these guys in I have battalions. Yep, they can be placed in combat reserve during that move phase earlier. Sorry, I should have done that. Making a meal of things. Okay, no modifiers. Column shifts. PA mode. So 2 to 1 goes up to 3 to 1. 4 to 1 for the artillery shift marker. There's 1 artillery shift marker on the attacker, so it comes down to 3 to 1. No adjacent defenders. 3 to 1. No regimental integrity for them. The Americans, oh yes they will, sorry. Regimental integrity balances out. AT balances out, so I think we're looking at 3 to 1. Proficiency bonus, they have a 6. The Americans have a 6. I think it's a 3 to 1 with no combat reserve. CR units. I think they have 2 CR units. I don't think the armor, can the armor count? Be within 3 hexes. Each unit with a combat reserve marker, each unit Okay, what type of unit size do we need? Be subordinate. Tracing a path. It's unclear. So it says combat reserve. You can place a unit in combat reserve. Each unit with a combat reserve marker. Well, I have 3 units there. Doesn't matter that one's a company. The rules don't say anything. That's a bonus of 15. Okay. If I'm understanding that correctly, which I'm not sure I am, but 3 units in this hex, 2 battalions, and that M4 company are in combat reserve within 3 hexes within the same formation, plus 15. Let's get the defender die roll first. They roll 27 plus 15 is 42. 42 result is going to be 1 mandatory hit, 1 discretionary hit. So I'm going to take the M10s off. And the discretionary hit, we will pull back with them. Actually, what the heck, let's take a step loss and stay where we are. Alright, now the attacker die roll. 68 goes up to 83, which is 1 mandatory, 1 discretionary. So I think we have to take that, and we'll hold our ground and take another discretionary on that. I think we have to roll to hold our ground. Ooh. To hold their ground, I think they have to pass a proficiency rating check. And if they fail, they must retreat 1 hex. Oh, they don't take a step loss, do they? It's just retreat 1 hex. Unfortunately, it's into that open ground, so they'd have to take a step loss. There's a lot going on there. Okay, so it doesn't really matter, but let's advance into there. Remove those prepared assault markers, remove the artillery shift markers. And we've got 1 turn. I'll remove that combat reserve marker, I think. We've got 1 turn for the Germans to counterattack and try and recapture this hex. They've used their artillery, so they're going to designate unit modes. And this is constricted terrain. Straight at it, I guess. Defense of 10. The Germans can only bring 2 units per hex, so they've got a strength of 3 in total there. 2 units here, 9. 9, 10 and a half. So it's just on 1-to-1 odds. There's no artillery shift. There's no AT being brought into the attack. 310. The Germans will have a proficiency rating. The Americans won't. Should advance with that unit. So it's a +1 bonus for the Germans. So five dice roll modifier. 1-to-1. Row 3. It's a bit of a gamble. Defender first. 02, it's a low roll. It goes up to 07, which is 2 mandatory hits for the Germans. 1. 2 and 2 discretionary hits. Ouch. Now, how do you resolve that for multiple hexes attacking? Discretionary hits. I want to hold my ground because I want to be able to advance. hold my ground. So I'm going to do a PR check. Passed. Okay, so they can hold their ground. PR passed. Step losses and fatigue. Okay, great. So I can just do basically... I understand this correctly. Fatigue. Now, attacker hits on the defender is 60 plus their bonus 65, which is just a proficiency rating check, which the Americans pass. So they hold their ground in an American victory. Oh, okay. So that's the second time I played through this scenario. The first time the Germans won, second time the Americans won. Now I am not at all confident that I've played through this correctly. There must be rules errors throughout that. This is an incredibly fiddly game. I'm gradually getting the hang of things, but constantly following through the various sequences of play and various modifiers and their various limitations. And it's a huge learning curve. I must be doing a heck of a lot wrong. It's just a lot that I don't understand. I don't feel confident at all with anything that I'm doing. I was tempted to move to the Bastogne scenario next. Done with Kesternich now, I think. So I might look at the next scenario, but I'm going to do it via Vassal because, as you can see, these counters are very, very thin and light, and they just want to bump around very easily. They're just kind of flimsy. And when you've got some big stacks, I can't even pick up, I can't get to particular units that I want to get to with these tweezers because I don't know why. It's just really hard to grab because the counters are so thin that it's a hassle to have to navigate through these stacks. And they're not huge stacks. They're, looking at 6, 7, 8 counters in these stacks, but you're constantly flicking through these stacks. And to have to do so, and to have to be constantly knocking things over and bumping things around, it's really frustrating. And this is the smallest scenario in the title. So things are just going to get bigger from here. So I'm going to shift my playthroughs of Wacht and Rhein to Vassal. Would make it a lot easier to view terrain. So if I need to see if there's sort of vantage points, rather than having to lift everything up, I can just kind of click the button. I'll show you how that works in Vassal once I set it all up. But folks, this concludes the battle for Kesternich. Second playthrough attempt, an American victory. Thanks everyone for watching and take care.